Grace Mitchell never expected her life to twist the way it did. Her parents had just sold their home of 30 years, a place filled with memories, birthdays, fights and dinners, and handed every dollar of the sale to her younger brother, Kevin. $650,000. When they told her, she had stood frozen in her small design studio, holding a strip of sandpaper in one hand. She barely had time to process that betrayal before the next one crashed into her life. Because when Grace refused to evict her tenants so her parents could stay, just for a while, they showed up at the rental house with suitcases, pounding on the front door like they already owned the place. That was the moment she realized the truth. They weren't crossing a boundary, they were invading her life. Before everything snapped, Grace had built herself piece by piece. For 8 years she shaped her world with sawdust, stubbornness, and long hours in her custom furniture studio. Most days she wore a soft linen shirt, old jeans, and her worn leather apron while she sanded walnut boards under the humming workshop heater. People often underestimated her, until they saw what her hands could create. Growing up, that had always been her story. Kevin was the investment. Grace was the child expected to understand. Her mother said the word so often it lost all meaning. Be understanding when Kevin gets the new bike. Be understanding when Kevin goes to an expensive camp. Be understanding your brother needs help with college. Grace paid for her own education with 3 part-time jobs while Kevin's tuition was wired instantly from their parents' account. As an adult, Grace kept her distance, not from anger but from survival. She could breathe better when she wasn't being squeezed into the role of the responsible one. Then she met Liam, the first person who truly saw her. He didn't see Grace, the daughter who should understand. He saw Grace, the artist, the builder, the woman who carved a life with her own hands. They bought a cozy home in Brookdale and started dreaming about a future. Quiet mornings together, late-night baby name lists, soft hopes for the child growing inside her. Part of that stability came from the rental home in Lakewood, a small investment she bought with her savings. Her tenants, Ben and Claire, were polite, respectful, and paid on time. Grace considered them ideal renters, certainly worth protecting. So when Grace's parents called one afternoon sounding breathlessly excited, she had no reason to brace herself. Her mother told her they'd finally sold the old house. The porch swing her father built, the kitchen her mother repainted 3 different colors, the rooms they fought and laughed in. Grace imagined them ready for a quiet retirement. She even smiled as her mother described how fast the house sold. Then her mother said the words that scraped something sharp inside Grace. "We gave the money to Kevin. All of it. Isn't that wonderful?" Grace pressed the phone to her ear, waiting for her mother to laugh or pause long enough to hear the shock in her silence. But she didn't. Instead, her mother eagerly listed the features of the penthouse Kevin wanted to buy downtown. And then came the sentence that changed everything. "We'll be moving into your rental for a little while. Just tell those tenants to leave." Grace didn't remember what she said afterward. Something flat, polite, the kind of response someone gives when their mind disconnects to protect itself. She hung up and stared at the wall while the scent of freshly cut oak filled her workshop. Her parents had given away $650,000 and immediately decided her property, her investment, would become their safety net. No request. No discussion. Just an expectation wrapped in entitlement. That evening when she told Liam, he stood at the kitchen counter, hands pressed against the granite. "Grace," he said softly, "you're not actually considering evicting them, right?" "Of course not," she replied immediately. "It's not even legal." Liam nodded. "And it's not right." Grace knew Liam was right, but her stomach tightened because she understood something he didn't. Her parents did not stop when told no. They pushed, pressed, and bulldozed until they got what they wanted. And the next morning proved it. Her mother called first, her voice soft and sugary. "Grace, honey, you sounded stressed yesterday. We only need the place for a little while." Then her father called hours later, firm and impatient. "Your mother is upset. Fix this." Grace repeated her answer again and again. "I can't remove tenants under a legal lease. It's illegal. It's unfair." But reason only works on people who want to hear reason. By afternoon her mother was crying. By evening her father was lecturing her about family duty. Grace had heard those words her whole life. Duty always meant sacrifice, but only from her side. The pressure grew worse the next day. Relatives she hadn't heard from in months suddenly remembered her number. Her Aunt Linda called her at 7 in the morning and launched straight into scolding. Your parents gave everything to help Kevin start his life, and you can't do one tiny thing for them? Grace held the phone tightly. It's not tiny. They want me to break the law. Linda scoffed. Well, you're the successful one. You should help. Always the same script. Grace the capable one, Grace the strong one, Grace the one whose comfort didn't matter because she could handle it. That afternoon Kevin texted her too. They need somewhere to stay. Be flexible, sis. She stared at the message, the same word from childhood staring back at her. Be understanding. Be flexible. Be less important. 3 days later the situation exploded. Grace was in her workshop sanding the edge of a maple countertop when her phone vibrated non-stop. It was Ben. His voice shook when she answered. Grace. There are people at the door saying they're moving in. They have suitcases. They're yelling. Grace's heartbeat stopped. Describe them, she said sharply. An older couple, he whispered. They said they're your parents. Of course they did. Grace grabbed her keys, sawdust still on her jeans, and rushed out of the studio. She drove across Denver with her pulse slamming against the steering wheel. When she turned onto the Lakewood street, she saw them immediately. Her parents standing on the porch with 2 giant suitcases and grocery bags like they were checking into a vacation home. Grace slammed her car door and stormed toward them. What are you doing? She asked. Her mother spun around, furious and impatient. They won't let us in, she shouted, pointing at the door. It's not your house, Grace said firmly. It's family property, her mother argued, lifting her chin as if saying it made it true. Her father took a step forward. We've been in a hotel for almost 2 weeks because you won't handle this. Grace's jaw tightened. You chose that situation. You sold your house. You gave all your money away. That doesn't make my rental your backup plan. The door cracked open and Ben peeked out nervously. Should I call someone? He whispered. No, Grace said, staring at her parents. But they will if you don't leave. Silence fell across the porch, sharp, cold, heavy. The kind of silence that comes before something breaks. Grace saw the truth clearly now. Her parents weren't confused or desperate. They felt entitled. They believed her life existed to cushion their decisions. They left the porch only because Ben lifted his phone as if dialing the police. Her father muttered, "This isn't over," while her mother cried loudly enough for neighbors to peek through their blinds. Grace watched them drag their suitcases back to the car and drive away. A hollow ache spread through her chest, not guilt, but the painful realization that this was only the first attempt. And she knew her parents well enough to understand one thing. They would try again. The next morning proved Grace right. Her phone lit up before sunrise with a message from her cousin Ryan. I can't believe you abandoned your parents like this. Then another from Aunt Linda. We heard you refused to let them stay. They're practically homeless. Homeless. Grace stared at the word, stunned by the dramatics. Her parents had willingly given away $650,000 without thinking twice. Yet somehow it was her responsibility to rescue them. A family group chat she never asked to join was suddenly filled with messages about honoring your elders and doing the right thing. Not a single person asked what actually happened. Not one asked about Ben and Claire or the legal lease she had signed. It wasn't concern, it was a coordinated guilt campaign. Liam watched her read message after message while she sat at the kitchen island with one hand resting on her belly. You can block them, he said softly. Grace nodded but didn't move. Blocking them would stop the noise but not the truth underneath it. Her parents believed they had unlimited access to her life, her home, her resources. If she didn't draw a clear line now, her future, especially with a baby on the way, would always be vulnerable to their demands. Meanwhile, through her cousin Emma, the only neutral voice, Grace discovered Kevin's penthouse plans had hit a wall. The bank needed proof of income. Kevin didn't have any. Without approval, he couldn't close the deal. Without closing, her parents wouldn't get their $650,000 back. Suddenly their desperation made more sense. 2 days later Kevin called. He didn't sound sad or embarrassed, just annoyed. Things are tight right now, he said casually. Brittany and I still need to pay the venue. It's only $18,000. Can you help? Grace blinked slowly, stunned by his tone. No, she said without hesitation. Kevin scoffed. Wow. Real supportive, Grace. That word supportive had always been twisted into a weapon in her family. Supportive meant sacrificing her stability. Supportive meant giving up what she earned. That night, after one more round of guilt-filled messages from relatives, something inside Grace clicked into place. She opened her laptop and began typing an email, clear, factual, and calm. She wrote out every detail: the sale of the house, the lease agreement, the illegal eviction request, the porch incident. She ended the email with one sentence: "If anyone believes my parents deserve housing more than my tenants do, please let me know which of you they will be moving in with." Then she hit send to 30 people. The following morning the group chat was silent. Not a single message. Not a single lecture. Not a single guilt tactic. For the first time in weeks Grace could breathe. But she knew silence didn't mean surrender. In her family silence meant regrouping. Entitlement rarely disappeared, it simply waited for a softer angle to return. It was a bright Saturday morning when the next attempt came. Grace and Liam were in the kitchen, sunlight warming the counters as they joked about baby names. Grace felt something she hadn't felt in weeks: lightness. Peace. Her phone wasn't buzzing. Her parents hadn't called. Even Kevin had gone quiet. Then the doorbell rang. Not once. Repeatedly. Insistently. Liam stepped toward the window, peeked outside, and his shoulders tensed. "Grace, it's them." She opened the Ring camera app, and there they were, her parents standing on the porch as if they were arriving for Thanksgiving dinner instead of ambushing the daughter they'd been attacking. Her mother held a bouquet of flowers. Her father carried a grocery bag. Her mother leaned toward the camera, smiling brightly, a performance polished with years of emotional manipulation. "Sweetheart, we brought the ingredients for your favorite pot roast. Let us in." Grace remained still. Liam whispered, "They're playing nice to gain access." Grace nodded. Her father cleared his throat and spoke to the camera. "We've reflected. We made mistakes. Let's talk like adults." Grace's stomach knotted. That phrase, "talk like adults," had always been his way of disguising control as reason. Grace didn't move. She didn't speak. She simply watched. Her mother's smile trembled, slipping into desperation. "Please, honey," she said softly. "We've been staying somewhere awful. We're exhausted. We miss you." Liam leaned closer. "Grace, these aren't apologies." And he was right. Every sorry was vague and conveniently paired with a request for Grace to let them inside. When she remained silent, the tone changed instantly. Her father stepped forward, his expression cold. "This is childish, Grace. Open the door." Her mother's voice sharpened. "We are your parents. We deserve respect." Grace didn't flinch. She didn't move. And that angered them more than anything. Her father crossed his arms. "If you don't let us in, we'll stay here until you do. You can't ignore us forever." Something inside Grace steadied, like a weight settling into the right place. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't doubting. She picked up her phone, opened the non-emergency police number, and pressed call. The operator answered. Grace exhaled slowly and said, "I need to report ongoing trespassing." Same individuals as before. Outside, her parents kept talking, unaware she had just made the call that would redefine everything. Then her mother's voice rose sharply. "Think about the baby, Grace. Don't you want us involved?" Grace closed her eyes. Not like this. Not through guilt. Not through ownership disguised as love. Her father banged on the door harder. "Stop being dramatic." It was almost funny coming from the people staging a doorstep intervention with flowers and grocery bags. When the patrol car turned onto the street, both parents' heads snapped toward it. Her mother's face crumpled. Her father's jaw tightened. They stepped back, uncertain for the first time. The officer approached calmly. "Ma'am, sir, the homeowner has asked you to leave the property." Her mother pointed toward the door. "We're her parents." "She's confused." Liam appeared in the doorway behind Grace. "She's not," he said firmly. The officer nodded and repeated, "You need to leave. You've been asked before." Her father stared into the camera, eyes sharp. "You'll regret this, Grace." But regret wasn't what Grace felt relief was. They left dramatically, as if hoping the neighborhood would pity them. When the police car pulled away, Liam wrapped his arms around Grace. She didn't cry. Instead, she felt something inside her unclench, a breath she'd been holding since childhood finally released. That evening, Grace's phone buzzed again. It was Kevin. She almost let it ring out, but curiosity made her swipe the green button. His voice exploded through the speaker. What did you do? Mom is crying. Dad is furious. Grace took a slow breath. I protected my home. Kevin scoffed loudly. You humiliated them. Grace's voice remained steady. They created the situation. I enforced a boundary. A long pause filled the line. Then Kevin snapped. They gave me everything to build my future and you can't even give them a place to stay? The truth laid bare. Yes, Grace said quietly. They gave everything to you. Not to me. Kevin didn't respond. The silence grew tight, sharp. Then he hissed, You're going to pay for this. Grace didn't bother replying. She simply pressed end call. For the first time she didn't feel shaken or guilty. She felt free. 2 days later, a plain envelope arrived at her parents' new apartment, the one bedroom they finally rented when every other door closed. Inside was a notice from Grace's attorney, a formal warning to stop trespassing or face legal consequences. According to Emma, her parents went pale when they opened it. Not angry. Not in denial. Just stunned that Grace finally had a boundary they could not push through. In the weeks that followed, everything began to settle. Her parents moved into the small apartment on the edge of town. Nothing like the luxury life they imagined after handing Kevin $650,000, but it was all they could afford now. The relatives who had screamed through group chats suddenly went silent when Grace's email, documents, and the police report made their way through the family. Entitlement is loud at first, but it dies fast when facts hit the room. Kevin stopped calling, too, though Emma mentioned he was scrambling financially, the penthouse dream completely gone. Meanwhile, Ben and Claire remained grateful tenants. They planted a garden in the backyard and sent Grace photos of the tiny tomato sprouts pushing up from the soil. Every update felt like a reminder that she had chosen the right people to protect. Liam helped Grace repaint the nursery a soft green. They stood side by side with rollers in their hands while sunlight poured through the window. Every stroke, every color choice, every laugh filled the room with something her family had never given her. Peace. One afternoon, Grace paused mid-stroke and said, Do you think I went too far? Liam set his roller down and turned to face her. No, he said softly. You finally protected yourself. And our child. Grace swallowed hard. It still feels strange, standing up to them. Liam cupped her face gently. That's because your whole childhood taught you to stay small. But you're not small, Grace. You're strong. And you made a choice that changes everything. She leaned into his palm, letting the truth settle in her chest. The change became obvious a few days later when Grace ran into Aunt Linda at the grocery store. Linda avoided eye contact at first, pushing her cart down the aisle a bit too quickly. But Grace simply smiled politely and continued picking out apples. For once she didn't shrink. She didn't explain. She didn't feel guilty. She felt unbothered. When Linda finally worked up the nerve to speak, her voice was unusually quiet. We didn't know everything, she muttered. Grace simply nodded. Most people didn't ask. And that was the end of that conversation. Her mother tried once more, only through a soft, wavering voicemail. Grace, we miss you. We want to be part of the baby's life. Grace listened fully this time. There was sadness, yes, but no apology, no acknowledgement of the harm done. It was an invitation built on expectation, not change. She didn't delete the message, but she didn't call back either. Liam wrapped an arm around her shoulders as she set her phone down. You're allowed to choose peace, he whispered. Grace nodded as tears pricked her eyes, not from hurt, but from closure. Spring deepened and Grace's workshop filled with the familiar scent of oak and fresh varnish. Orders for custom furniture grew as word spread about her craftsmanship. She ran her fingers over the smooth grain of a maple dining table she had just finished. This was her life. Not perfect. Not loud. But honest and built by her own hands. She no longer carried the weight of her family's expectations. She no longer lived on call for their demands. Instead, she lived in a home filled with love, support, and choices she made freely. One warm morning, as she stood in the nursery sorting tiny baby clothes, Grace realized something important. The peace she felt wasn't because her parents had stepped back. It was because she had stepped forward into herself, her boundaries, her future. Everything looked different now. The walls felt safer. The rooms felt brighter. Even her breaths felt fuller. She hadn't just defended her home. She had defended the home she would raise her child in. A home shaped by care, not control. By love, not obligation. Looking back, people assumed the hardest part for Grace was calling the police on her own parents. But it wasn't. The hardest part was admitting how long she had lived smaller than she needed to, shrinking herself to keep the peace, accepting scraps of respect because she was taught daughters should always understand. But peace built on silence is not peace at all. It's surrender. And the day Grace stopped surrendering, her life finally opened. Her parents might never understand the line she drew, but that line would protect her child from a legacy of guilt and favoritism. Grace smiled as she closed the nursery door behind her. For the first time in her life, the future felt entirely hers.